Hello everybody, I'm Raphael Perry and I've just finished having a rather nice discussion with the developers of the Limbo Eternal War skirmish game. Now, I can't remember if I did a preview picture or any kind of videos about the gorgeous miniatures for this game when they arrived on my channel. I think I might have filmed an unboxing or a bit of one, shown off some of the miniatures and decided the video wasn't up to scratch. But anyway, it's a gorgeous game. I've got hours of enjoyment out of it, and yet I haven't even played it yet. I've been looking at the miniatures, working out what I'm going to paint and when, and basically, of course, what then happened was a nasty, horrible disease, and we all had to stay in our houses, and hopefully I'll be getting back together with friends soon as lockdown eases off, and being able to finally play this wonderful game. So, Limbo Eternal War is a game basically of apocalyptic proportions. It's a apocalyptic skirmish game with lots of demons and devils and humans and even angels and heavenly forces pitted off against each other. And the game came out, lots of people got it, and there were some issues. There was some bits of inconsistent wording in the rulebook that didn't quite work out. There was some issues of confusion. I myself got confused by the charge rule mechanics because there was an ambiguity there. I think I've got it straight now, so that's all good. But that's me and some other community members, we had a nice little chat with the game's designers and developers because they wanted to ask us about some things going forwards with the game and get our opinions on them. And I am allowed to share some information with you all. So if you have fun watching this video, then hey, maybe you heard it here first. Other bigger channels will probably cover it with nice fancy graphics and animations and memes and all that stuff, but I tend to keep things a little more basic here. So let's have a look and see what I am allowed to show off. So, first off, there was discussion about how the game was packaged. Originally, I'm going to bring this image back up again, okay? Originally, the game was in 2 boxes. And, you know, some miniatures were in one box, some miniatures were in the other box. Generally, the bigger miniatures were in the second box, and the first box had all the sort of human-sized miniatures, right? And that worked out quite well. However, the game's designers are now saying they'd like to do things a little differently. They would like to keep the game in 2 boxes, but put all the humans and angels in one box and all the demons and devils and nasty things in a separate box. Because when the new faction comes out, because we do know there is a new faction coming, and it's going to be Vikings and dragons, and it's going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to it. But when that comes, I could like phone up my mate at the club and say, hey man, do you fancy a game of Limbo tonight? And he'd be like, yeah, cool, let's do that. Tell you what, I fancy playing Vikings tonight. I suppose you're going to want to play angels again. And I'd say, well, you know, actually I fancy playing demons instead. So I could just like pick up the demons box, take it with me to the club, leave the angels at home. So by just having a faction box you can pick up, keep things separate, that seems like a really good, nice, simple idea to me. Not that complicated, works a treat. I think that's a really good idea. And then when the Viking box comes, there'll be the Viking faction, and then if they get to other factions, there was talk of an Egyptian faction and a Technomancer faction, possibly in the future. Not a lot of details about them yet, and probably not anything I'm allowed to share beyond those words anyway. So, yeah. So I think keeping the factions in their own boxes is a good idea because some of the miniatures are rather big. So here is the dwarf. Now bear in mind the game plays on around a 38 to 40mm scale. So he's technically around the same size you'd expect your humans to be in most other games. And here we have 2 massive demonic creatures and some angelic contraptions of a mechanical nature. They're currently in a very deep tub in my room, alongside a massive giant and some other things. But as you can see, these are absolutely stonking huge. Gorgeous miniatures, heavily detailed. And I'll hope to get them out and do a video on them sometime soon if I haven't already. Now, what am I allowed to show off? Because there were some images shared during the chat about how the game may develop going forward. So first off, we have the Lord card. Now previously, the Lord was the leader of our faction on the battlefield, and they just had a single stat card like any other character. And that was okay, but it wasn't too helpful. Now, there's been talk of some kind of character progression, or even time added into campaigns if people want to play that way. But here we have Wrath, the great big demon of anger, fury, and wrath, oddly enough. And he is sitting on a great big rocky crag. Now, this would be a Lord board, like a generic board for any hero leading a faction. So here is a rough representation of his stat profile. Here would be some skill cards, which would be laid over these empty spaces, right? Showing his regular abilities. And here we have a life track with some hearts, and a victory point track, so you can keep track of your victory points over the course of the game. As opposed to the previous way where it was done, where you just have this one card with the skills on the bottom underneath the profile, and you'd have to just track the damage of tokens or something. Now, and the victory points would be tracked separately as well. Now these are definitely sliders moving in slots along the card, so this would need to be quite a thick board. However, they come quite close to the edge of the board, at least on this side, and the two slots are very close to each other. I'm not sure that I'm so keen on sliders. Now, another important thing about having cards for the abilities is that you could upgrade the Demon of Wrath by giving him new abilities, and you could put them on top of these, just like replacing his generic abilities, or even in empty slots here. And I think the idea is that you'd have the board with these default abilities of his pre-printed on, and any new skill you gave him would have to replace an existing skill. And you would either gain the skill over the course of a campaign for, glorious deeds in battle, or maybe you could pay some extra points when you're building your army and be like, hey, yeah, I just want to have this skill now. It will replace something, so it's a bit of a trade-off. Is it worth it? I don't know. Now down here we have a slightly different example where they'd place his image on here, and then that's his old stat card, like literally the way the card used to look. And then the Aura of Infinite Rage is here, Relish for Slaughter is there, and then you could put cards on top. So you'd have this as a default. We still got the sliders here in this image, keeping track of both on the same track. So you've got the two sliders, you'd have to make sure they don't knock into each other. And sliders can break boards if you're not careful with them, so I'm not sure sliders is the way to go. However, we have this image, which is more of a, these are all prototypes, they're nowhere near final. It'd be like, there's your Lord card image, whatever, here's where your skills go. That might be like some kind of special ultimate skill you're allowed to place there after you've filled these three, and then you can put a special skill card with a flaming skull or something here. And you have trackers here, again, for health and victory points. They could be two separate tracks, or I'm not sure entirely what these would be for. Oh, these could be for fate, maybe the pool of fate that is used in the game. And then down here, we have the same card, but instead we have spaces for health and victory points where you would just place the 10-sided dice that came in the original game box that were not mentioned once in the rulebook, and a few people wondered what to do with them, and most people eventually worked out, hey, we can use these to track a 2-digit number of victory points. So we could just put the dice on the board or have tokens to put on it. There's numerous different ways of handling that. Here we have another example with the two tracks along the board. So this is obviously prototypes leading back towards, like, say, this one. And indeed, down here we see pretty much that exact same image. This one with no skills on it, and this one with skills added. Here I see an Inspire Frenzy skill. A friendly character within 2 and sight takes 2 damage. Boost all that character. Oh, boost all, nice. just boost everything. Yeah, he just. I can see why the damage goes in there. Roads for slaughter. When he takes down the free which ones draw. Okay, draw a fake card. That's good. Wrath and adjacent friendly characters get +1 attack while bloodied. Okay, yeah, so being bloodied at half damage. Right, so obviously these are low resolution images. I'm just showing them as big on the screen as I can. Here we have an image of the upgrade cards or fake cards that you might be able to apply to units. And an idea is that you could have the number 1 cards be like your basic intro deck. So it could be like, here's a tutorial how to play the game. Pick up this deck of cards, you pick up that deck of cards to take your factions, and it would walk you through turn by turn so that you'd learn the actions and get a good idea of how everything goes together. And then when you get to the end of that, it'd be like, and now get to the big main rulebook, pick that up, read through it, and learn how to play properly. Now you've had a bit of fun and got a good understanding of the rules. That's a nice way to work your way into things. So the idea would be the number 1 would be your basic cards. Number 2 might be like an advanced card. The X, obviously, for the polymorph. That's something you put on an enemy to turn them into a little sheep. And they're not very dangerous then. They're a harmless little lamb. Now, what else have we got here? Oh, yes. Speaking of the Viking faction, we've seen all these sculpts before in the Saga of Noadim 75mm figure campaign. And yes, these are heavily detailed and very big figures, about twice the size they need to be in-game. I imagine that we'll lose a fair bit of detail scaling things down. Not a massive amount, actually, because they're pretty good on that front at Limbo. But even so, things like maybe the feathers on that feathered boot, that'd have to get toned down a lot. Some of these details on the staff would be reduced. And of course, got a big angry woman riding a wolf. You know that'd be important. But I can tell you that I've seen some pictures of things that are going into the upcoming campaign for the new version. And all these characters are definitely there in the Viking faction, and they look gorgeous. Not allowed to show you a lot of stuff from that yet, so that'll have to wait, I'm afraid. There has been talk, of course, of the rules versus the new stuff. And the guys at Limbo are torn. They could try and keep them separate campaigns, or they could try and cluster it into one campaign. There is a plan, if it all goes into one campaign, where there would be a cheap upgrade box for those of us who got the first game to give us a rules update. Any new cards that need replacing, any like bigger tokens or anything like that. And overall, the rules aren't generally going to change that much, but they're going to be made easier to understand, because there were some issues in the rulebook where things weren't made entirely clear, and there was room for ambiguity and misunderstanding. So tidying up the rules, making them easier to understand, making them more accessible and perhaps a little bit simpler. And there would be a free PDF for backers of the previous campaign with all the new stuff in, so you could just print it up and use it, or just have it on your mobile phone or your computer beside the table when you play, so that those of us who bought the game first time around, like myself, don't have to go, oh, why do we have to back a new campaign to get an update on the rules? It's like, no, rules update would be free anyway, but it would also be part of the rewards for this new campaign. And there would also be some expansion packs. So some of you may know how Steamforge games are doing their mythic encounters or epic encounters, whatever they call them. The encounter in a box thing, where here's a dragon and here's all his minions and his pile of treasure and some rules if you want to play a game of 5th edition or something, all in one box. There you go. Pick up your box, go sit down with your mates and play with it. And they've done the dragon one, they've done the orc one, the goblin one's coming out soon. They've done a few others. They did that Snake People, I think. So Steamforge have really been nailing this encounter in a box feel. It's kind of similar to what Privateer Press did in the early days of War Machine and Hordes, with the starter boxes, the faction starter boxes. There's your Warcaster and his War Machines, or there's your Warcaster, your Warlock and her beasts or whatever, you know. And the guys at Limbo have been talking about doing this with some of the stretch goal extra miniatures from the first campaign, so that those of us who missed out on them first time round can pick up a box and go like, here's like 4 or 5 miniatures and all the rules we need to include them in a game of Limbo. So you could have your main big box and your expansion box, which you would just stick on there as optional extras. And I think that's okay in theory, but the fact that the boxes would need to be either all old material or all new material, so that we could be sure we're not like... Because I could look at a box and go, hey, there's 4 guys in this box, and one of them is new, and the other 3 are existing ones I've got already. Why should I have to buy this box to get this one guy? Now, if it was like 12 guys in the box and 2 or 3 of them are ones I've got already, then maybe it's a good deal, right? So I think they need to think about what would go in which boxes and where. And I think that about wraps it up overall. I don't know when the new campaign is coming, but it is coming. I think they need to make sure they've definitely dealt with all the issues from the first campaign, because some people got broken miniatures or missing parts that are being replaced, and they're doing the best they can, guys. So hopefully that'll all get sorted out, and we can have a nice new campaign to look forward to in the future. Alright, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you've all enjoyed watching, and I'll look forward to bringing you more on the development of the future Limbo rules update and Vikings and Dragons expansion of awesomeness, as and when I'm allowed to. Bye for now, guys. Hope you enjoyed yourselves, and see you all next time.